In a single year, he lost it all. The most watched role on American television, $38 million of his own money, and an 18-year marriage. And yet, this wasn't the first time. Kevin Costner once ruled Hollywood, 2 Academy Awards in hand, billions at the box office, a name that could greenlight any film. Then the world turned on him. They mocked him, shamed him, watched his life unravel under the headlines. And still, he didn't vanish. He came back at 65, climbed to the top again, only to repeat the same devastating pattern. This isn't just a story about fame, it's a story about obsession, risk, and a relentless drive that ignores every warning. What compels a man to bet everything and lose it every single time? Stay with me. The answer will shock you. Nowhere to belong, Kevin Michael Costner was born on January 18, 1955, in Linwood, California, the third son of Sharon and William Costner. His father was a utility worker for Southern California Edison, a man who believed in discipline, routine, and the quiet dignity of showing up every single day. His mother was warm, but stretched thin across 3 boys and a life that never stayed still. The family moved constantly. Compton, Delano, Visalia, Villa Park. Every few years, a new town, a new school, a new cafeteria full of strangers who had already chosen their friends. Kevin later said, with a kind of plainness that makes the words hit harder, that he never truly felt he belonged anywhere growing up. He was always arriving somewhere that already had its walls built. And that did something to him. It taught him to watch before he walked into a room, to read people before he trusted them, to study the invisible architecture of every social situation before he committed to a single step. That instinct, observation first, action second, would become the foundation of his entire career. But as a boy, it was just loneliness wearing a mask. What saved him were 2 things: water and words. He swam competitively, and he devoured books and films with an appetite that bordered on obsession. He wrote poetry as a teenager, private verses nobody else read, feelings he could not yet say out loud. He sang in his church choir without realizing he was training himself to perform, to inhabit emotion and project it outward into a room full of strangers. At Cal State Fullerton, he studied business administration because saying, "I want to be an actor," out loud felt too exposed, too vulnerable, too far from the measured world his father inhabited. But the dream would not stay quiet. He started slipping into acting workshops on the side, testing whether the feeling was real. It was real. It burned with a consistency nothing else in his life matched. By the time he graduated in 1978, he had made a decision that terrified him. He was going to pursue acting, not as a hobby, not as a safety net, as everything. His father did not fight him. He simply looked at his son with the clear eyes of a man who had spent 40 years in practical labor and asked him to be realistic. Kevin heard him. He did not change direction. From cut to stardom, he married Cindy Silva in 1978, his college sweetheart. And what followed was not a montage of rising glory. It was years of survival. Kevin worked as a stagehand. He drove trucks. He labored in a fish hatchery. He showed up to every audition he could find and collected rejections the way other men collect regrets. Hollywood in those years did not see Kevin Costner. Not really. He landed small, forgettable parts in films that went nowhere. Casting directors filed him under fine but not memorable, and the industry ground forward without him. Then came the moment that nearly killed the dream entirely. In 1983, he was cast in a small but meaningful role in Lawrence Kasdan's The Big Chill, a film about college friends reuniting after a mutual friend's death. Kevin played the dead friend. He prepared meticulously. He gave everything to those brief scenes. Then the editor cut him completely. Not trimmed, gone. His only appearance in the finished film was a glimpse of his legs being dressed for burial. Years of work had led to this, and the moment had been erased. Most people would have heard that as a verdict. Kevin Costner heard it as a door he refused to let close. Lawrence Kasdan, feeling the guilt of what had happened, promised Kevin a real chance. That chance came in 1985 with Silverado, a sweeping Western that finally gave him a stage worthy of what he had been carrying in silence. In a film crowded with established names like Danny Glover, Scott Glenn, and Jeff Goldblum, Costner held his own with an effortless, almost dangerous charisma. He was loose where others were stiff, magnetic where others were merely competent. Directors noticed. Audiences noticed. The machinery that had ignored him for years slowly began to turn. Then came The Untouchables in 1987, where he stood opposite Sean Connery and Robert De Niro and did not shrink. Bull Durham in 1988 made him the most desired leading man in Hollywood overnight. And Field of Dreams in 1989 crystallized what he meant on screen. Not an action hero, not a muscle-bound spectacle, but an ordinary man who believed in extraordinary things. The man who built a baseball diamond in a cornfield because a voice told him to. A line so simple it should not work. If you build it, he will come. In his hands, it became unforgettable. The hidden cost of stardom. By 1990, Kevin Costner had defied Hollywood's expectations and carved a place for himself at the very top. Against the advice of every studio executive, he directed and starred in Dances with Wolves, a 3-hour epic western about a Union soldier discovering his humanity among the Lakota Sioux. The film included long stretches of dialogue entirely in the Lakota language, unhurried, untranslated, and daring in its authenticity. Studios had predicted failure, arguing that audiences wouldn't sit through subtitles and slow pacing. Yet Costner's gamble paid off. Dances with Wolves won 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director, and at 35, Costner stood on the podium not as a reluctant hero, but as Hollywood's undisputed champion. He didn't stop there. In 1992, he starred in The Bodyguard alongside Whitney Houston, creating one of the most iconic screen romances of the decade. The film grossed over $400 million worldwide and became the second highest-grossing film of the year, cementing Costner as a global phenomenon. His name alone could greenlight projects, fill arenas with eager audiences, and silence critics. For a brief moment, Kevin Costner had it all: the power, the fame, the acclaim, and the world at his feet. But behind the glittering accolades, a quieter, more painful story was unfolding. The obsessive drive that propelled him to superstardom was slowly eroding the foundations of his personal life. During the filming of Dances with Wolves, Costner spent months in the remote expanses of South Dakota, completely absorbed in directing, acting, and solving the endless logistical challenges of such an ambitious project. Every day was a balancing act between creating cinematic history and maintaining a presence in his own life. Unfortunately, the scales were heavily tilted toward the former. Cindy Silva, his college sweetheart and wife since 1978, had been his unwavering support system. She had stood beside him through every period of struggle, from small acting jobs to truck driving stints, believing in his talent when few others did. She raised their 3 children, Annie, Lily, and Joe, largely on her own while Kevin immersed himself in his work. Costner later admitted with raw honesty, I wasn't as present as I should have been. I was always somewhere else in my head. The dedication that built his legend also drove a wedge between him and the life he was meant to cherish. By 1994, after 16 years of marriage, Cindy filed for divorce. Reports suggested the settlement was near $80 million, a staggering sum that mirrored the magnitude of Costner's public achievements. The timing was particularly cruel. His professional empire was soaring just as his personal life was unraveling. Hollywood insiders would later describe this period as the first real test of Costner's ability to manage success without losing himself entirely. The tragic duality of Costner's life was a pattern that would repeat itself in later years. While he was celebrated for his artistry and commitment, the sacrifices required for his vision were immense. The personal cost of success, the quiet loneliness, the fractured relationships, and the relentless pressure to uphold an image was a reality few in Hollywood were willing to confront publicly. Yet for Costner, this tension was part of the price of creation. It wasn't failure that defined him, but the courage to continue betting on his vision, even when the stakes were impossibly high. Looking back, this period of Kevin Costner's life illustrates a universal truth. Extraordinary talent often demands extraordinary sacrifice. His journey was never just about awards, box office numbers, or critical acclaim. It was about a man who risked everything to tell the stories he believed in, sometimes at the expense of the life he loved. The applause at award shows and the adoration of audiences worldwide could not fill the void left by the personal moments he missed. The crown of Hollywood success was dazzling, yes, but its hidden cost was profound. A quiet heartbreak that would shadow even his greatest triumphs. Kevin Costner's story is a reminder that behind every celebrated artist lies a complex, often painful reality. The ability to build something monumental, to create films that define a generation, can demand sacrifices that are rarely seen on screen. The world may remember the awards, the box office records, and the cinematic brilliance, but the truth is far more human. Costner's most enduring battles were not fought on set, but in the spaces between fame and family, triumph and loss, legacy and loneliness. The spectacular fall. By 1993, Kevin Costner had earned the rarest currency Hollywood offers: unconditional trust. Studios greenlit his projects on name alone. He commanded $15 million per film. He could have coasted for the rest of his career on safe, profitable choices. Instead, he chose a flooded apocalypse. Waterworld was a science fiction epic set in a future where the polar ice caps had melted and drowned every continent. The original budget was approximately $100 million, already the most expensive film ever proposed. Kevin committed to star, stepped in as producer, injected his own money, and attached his name to every decision. What followed was a prolonged, public, increasingly humiliating catastrophe. Filming took place on open ocean near Hawaii. Storms destroyed the sets. Equipment sank. The budget swelled to $175 million, a number so obscene for 1995 that the press could not stop repeating it. Late-night hosts sharpened their knives. The trade publications ran daily updates like they were covering a slow-motion train wreck. They called it fish tar. They called it the end of Kevin Costner. When Waterworld finally released, the reviews were not the massacre the press had promised. They were worse. They were indifferent. The film eventually turned a profit internationally, but the story had already been written. Waterworld became a symbol of excess, ego, and a star who flew too close to the sun. And the empire did not stop burning. In 1997, Kevin returned with The Postman. another sweeping, ambitious post-apocalyptic epic he directed himself. Critics who might have engaged with its themes arrived sharpened by the narrative of Costner's decline and found only evidence of delusion. The film lost tens of millions. The Razzie Awards nominated it in nearly every category. The man who had accepted Best Director at the Academy Awards was now being handed mock trophies for the worst work in Hollywood. Meanwhile, his marriage was ending, his bank account was bleeding, and an entire industry that had worshipped him 5 years earlier watched his collapse with barely concealed satisfaction. Kevin Costner navigated both catastrophes in full public view with a composure that many mistook for coldness, and which was, in reality, something much closer to controlled grief. Kevin Costner, Triumph and Tragedy. Hollywood doesn't exile its stars with dramatic headlines. It cools quietly. Calls return slower. Projects attached to younger names. By the mid-2000s, Kevin Costner had felt that subtle freeze firsthand. He kept working. Open Range, 2003. The Upside of Anger, 2005. Mr. Brooks, 2007. Films that proved his craft had not diminished. Critics still recognized his charisma, but the audience numbers were smaller, the box office less forgiving, and the cultural conversation had moved on without him. If anything, the humiliations of the late 1990s and early 2000s had reshaped him. The egotistical invincibility that had fueled Waterworld and The Postman was replaced by something more textured, more honest. A performer stripped down by failure and personal loss, yet refined by it. He didn't rage against Hollywood's indifference. Instead, he worked around it. He toured with his band, spent time with his children, and embraced a quieter, more deliberate life. In 2004, he married Christine Baumgartner, a model and horse breeder, and together they built what appeared to be a redemption story. 3 children, Caden, Hayes, and Grace, and a ranch in Aspen, Colorado, where the rugged landscape mirrored his love for open spaces and self-reliance. But even as his personal life seemed stable, the creative fire that had defined him never cooled. In 2018, Taylor Sheridan, the rising writer-director behind Sicario and Hell or High Water, reached out. He was building a television series centered on a powerful Montana ranching family and envisioned Kevin as John Dutton, the patriarch. The project was ambitious, but understated at first. When Yellowstone premiered on the Paramount Network, it was quietly, almost unassumingly. But the story struck a chord. Word of mouth spread like wildfire. By the second season, Yellowstone was drawing over 10 million viewers per episode, dominating cable television and creating a cultural phenomenon no algorithm could have predicted. Kevin Costner, now 65, was once again the biggest star on American TV, proof that a career that Hollywood had quietly shelved could return with a vengeance. Yet, as the industry marveled, the pattern that had defined Costner's life began to repeat. In parallel with Yellowstone's success, he pursued Horizon, an American saga, a 4-part epic western he had been developing for decades. He wasn't just starring in it, he was producing, directing, and shaping every creative decision. The project demanded total immersion. Kevin invested $38 million of his own money, shouldered schedules that collided with his television commitments, and devoted himself to the vision entirely. By May 2023, the strain became too great. It was announced that Costner would not return for the final episodes of Yellowstone, leaving the series in the hands of the writers and directors. 1 month later, Christine filed for divorce after 18 years of marriage, the timing echoing the heartbreak of his earlier life. 3 children, Another dissolution of a personal life shadowed by an all-consuming devotion to art. The pattern was unmistakable: obsessive pursuit of a vision at the cost of presence, love, and family. The cost had been paid twice. When Horizon, an American saga chapter, one released in June 2024, it received respectful but commercially disappointing reviews. Chapter 2 was pulled from the release calendar, leaving a story unfinished for an audience not yet ready to embrace it. Yet Costner faced the cameras at Cannes with the same unwavering conviction he had displayed decades earlier. Calm, composed, and unbroken, he declared, "I believe in this story. I will finish it." For Kevin Costner, the measure of success has never been awards, box office numbers, or public applause. It has always been fidelity to vision, even when the world wasn't ready, even when the personal cost was enormous. Triumph and tragedy have danced in equal measure across his life, leaving a portrait of a man who keeps building, keeps betting, keeps standing, even when everything he loves hangs in the balance. When the lights fade and the cameras stop rolling, Kevin Costner's story isn't about the awards, the money, or the fame. It's about the man who kept building, kept betting, kept standing, even when the world told him to quit. He has fallen, he has failed, and yet he is still here, still shaping his own legend, still proving that vision can outlast the noise. So ask yourself, how far would you go for a dream that everyone else calls impossible? And when the world pushes back harder than ever, would you keep going or walk away?